On to day 6 of our Advent, Legay is going to tell us about St. Nicholas.
Because it's St. Nicholas Day.
That makes a lot of sense as to why we're talking about him today. So Legay, teach us, St. Nicholas, who was he?
So we've talked about St. Barbara before, exactly on December the 4th. And I told you that she was kicked out of the Catholic calendar because a lot of things were quite vague about her life. For example, where she was born. And of St. Nicholas, we know where he was born, but things are also a bit vague, so we don't know too much about his personal life. There are many legends, but we don't exactly know how truthful these legends are. So let's maybe start with the dates. He was either born in 270 or 286, so we have a 16-year span. And he was born in Patara. So I'll show you Patara. It's beautiful. This is a place where I would like to go for a holiday.
I could see why. It's quite something.
And you can tell very clearly there is Greek architecture. So especially in the last two, this looks very Greek. And this is actually in southern Turkey nowadays. But southern Turkey and a lot of the rest of Turkey, the west coast, for example, that was a Greek colony. So we're talking about someone who's ethnically Greek here. He's not Turkish, although the city is now in Turkey. He spoke Greek and he came from a wealthy Greek family that had already accepted Christianity. Patara is near the city of Antalya in today's Turkey. And he didn't stay there. He moved on a little bit, but only a little bit, because he's known as Nicholas of Myra. So let me show you Myra. And I'll also give you a map for Myra so you have an idea where it is. So this is the port where he lived for most of his life after moving out of Patara. And Patara is in the direct neighborhood. We know that he died on December the 6th. But we don't know which year. So we have 4 years between 326 and 365, spanning about 40 years. So we can't really tell how old he was when he died. Because we don't have a birth date and we don't have a death date. We have the day he died.
Right.
But like St. Barbara, he's very, very popular. He's worshipped throughout all of Christianity. And when England made the switch from Catholicism to Protestantism, they initially tried to abolish all saints. They tried to get rid of St. Nicholas too. But that didn't happen. So the English held on to St. Nicholas, although they became Protestants, and saints are a thing that is more closely related to Catholicism and to Orthodoxy. But, well, being very popular, they still wanted to keep him. Myra was part of the Roman Empire back then and the whole region. So when we talked about St. Barbara, I told you that I was going to show you. This is the full Roman Empire in the 4th century. And I have a very good map, but it has some Greek writing on it.
Whoa.
So the yellow part is called Galatias. That is the Galatias province that contains England and France and a small part of Germany. And then you have Spain and Portugal in it and a part of North Africa. The blue part is the Italias province with Italy and a part of what used to be Yugoslavia, so different countries now, but that used to be Yugoslavia, with the islands Sardinia and Corsica and Sicily and a part of the North African coast. The green part is Greece with a little bit of the Slavic area north of it. And with the island of Crete, that is called the Illyrias province, and the red one is the Anatolis province. And Anatolis province, that name still sticks, so part of eastern Turkey is still called Anatolia. It also contains part of Greece and Bulgaria here, and you have North Africa with Egypt and part of Libya, the Sinai and part of the Middle East, down to a good portion of the Saudi Arabian coast. So we're talking about the red part here. That is the part where St. Nicholas came from and also where St. Barbara came from. So it doesn't matter where St. Barbara actually was from, whether it was Turkey or Lebanon, it's both in the Anatolias province. And it's quite close in time too. It's 3rd century. So I don't know if they ever met. I don't think so. Because she didn't get out much. You know, she was locked up in her tower.
Yeah.
So probably not. We can translate his name. We can also do that with Saint Barbara, but you know, you actually know her name. You know what it means, because it's related to the word barbarian in English. So there's not much to translate. With Saint Nicholas, that's a bit more tricky, but it is a Greek name, and it can roughly be translated to national victory. That's
Okay.
what Nicholas means.
That's interesting.
He had an uncle who was a bishop, and at the age of 19, Nicholas himself became a priest. He was consecrated by his uncle. And he also became an abbot of a monastery in a place named Sion. So not with a Z, but with an S. Sion. He is also known as Nicholas the Wonder Worker, and we will talk a lot about the miracles that are associated with him. And as I already said, there are some silly ones about his childhood, but they're very short ones. So I've only written down the most important ones, and if you need more, then you can research that. And I think it's a whole lot. So I have a couple of miracles here. These are really the big ones. Saint Nicholas is not quite like the other children. So again, we don't have too much information about what actually happened, because the oldest descriptions of his life showed up about 200 years after his death. But the legends tell a lot, and they tell us about a man who got into fist fights every now and then, and who went to prison in one case for it. So this should be interesting, as interesting as St. Barbara. Okay, before he himself became a bishop, he went on pilgrimages to Egypt and Syria. But that was not the most exciting thing he did. So we know that he traveled, and that makes sense that he later on becomes a patron saint of travelers. But there is more to his life. So at his time, there was an emperor in charge of the Roman Empire who was called Emperor Diocletian. And Diocletian didn't like Christians. So Nicholas, being from a Christian family, got into trouble. Christians were persecuted around that time, and they were persecuted in his region. So he was arrested, he was imprisoned, and he was also tortured during imprisonment. This supposedly happened in the year 310. He would have been almost 40 if we take the first birth date, but that is probably not the case. So I think that he may have been around 24 at that time. So the year 270 really doesn't make sense. He wasn't imprisoned and tortured for long, because we have a different emperor, Constantine the Great, and technically he was in charge since the year 306. So he was already in charge for 4 years when Nicholas got imprisoned. But it was a situation where he was kind of a co-emperor with Diocletian. So at first they ruled together. And Constantine tried to kick the other emperor and the other local warlords out of their positions. He managed to do this in 312 in the west and 324 in the east. But Greece may have been labeled part of the west. So by east, they're usually talking about the Middle East and, down to Saudi Arabia. So most likely Nicholas was only imprisoned for 2 years, but of course that's also a long time when you get tortured. And things changed when Constantine the Great took over completely, because that is the emperor who made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. So that is his first imprisonment. And then we have one during the First Council of Nicaea, and that council was called in because they had some heretics to deal with, and they didn't have the Inquisition back then. So they actually tried to talk to the people who had a different opinion, which sounds very civilized. Nicholas allegedly appeared at the council, but he didn't stay for long, and he didn't really do anything memorable. So he's not in the official lists. We have official lists for the council, which implies that he either didn't go or he didn't stay for very long, and he didn't sign up for anything during the council, so he probably wasn't part of the debates. What we know about him is that he got into a fist fight with the heretic, the leader of the heretics, whose name was Arius, and he was a heretic because he doubted that Christ was eternal like God. And this is still seen as heresy in the church nowadays. Arius thought that only God was eternal and Christ had existed as an idea since before time, so since before the universe was created by God, but he was younger than God. And this idea only turned into a human being much, much later. So he said that Christ existed as an idea, but was not as old as God. Yeah, the other Christians didn't like that. But Nicholas was the only one who punched him in the face. Yeah, he was briefly stripped of his bishop's title and imprisoned for this, but he got out quickly and they gave him his title back. Yeah, it wasn't as horrifying as his first imprisonment, but he is a saint who has first-hand experiences with being imprisoned and being tortured, actually. And this is why this is also one of his patronages. And the patronages are, starting with the biggest one, travelers. So he's a patron of sailors, but also of people who travel across land. And when we're talking about sailors, we're talking about both sea and freshwater. He's a patron saint of merchants, especially when they're related to grain. So when they're transporting wheat or selling wheat, for example, that is especially interesting to him. He's a patron saint of transport drivers, like truck drivers nowadays, for example, and pilgrims, because he himself used to be a pilgrim. Then his other big patronage is children. So he's the patron saint of school children and students, of ushers, toy makers, and unmarried people. And, in the old days, up until the middle of the 20th century, in many places, unmarried people counted as children, because it was not related to the age, it was related to your marital status. So I've seen that with someone from Azerbaijan. We talked about this in the late 2000s. So in her country, that was still the case. When she knew that one of our co-students wasn't married, she would call that person a boy or a girl, not a man or a woman. And we had someone who was well into his 20s, and she kept calling him a boy, because he wasn't married, so technically still a child from her point of view.
Interesting.
Just to make this clear, why unmarried people are part of the children's patronage. He's also a patron of seniors, so that seems to contradict that, but I think that we can say he's really a patron of people who are especially vulnerable. That is one thing that goes through the whole patronage thing, that he is interested in helping people who are vulnerable. Next one, also a big one, is the judicial system. So he's a patron saint of prison personnel, but also of prisoners. So it's the wardens and the inmates. He's especially interested in repentant thieves. So thieves as such, but he likes it better when they actually feel bad about what they have done. And a patron saint of lawyers. And then he has some that are weird and that we're going to look into. For example, he's a patron saint of brewers. But there is a funny story that explains that he's actually not a patron saint of brewers, but that was a misunderstanding. Then he has some tailors, coopers, butchers, bakers, salt workers, grain workers, pawnbrokers, pharmacists, lovers, and prostitutes. So he's really big in Orthodoxy and in Italy, and he has a second name that is Nicholas of Bari, and Bari is in southern Italy, and we'll get into that, why he's called Nicholas of Bari. But yes, those are the patronages. So as you can see, it doesn't say anywhere that he's a gift giver.
No, but he does. He's a patron of a lot of different kinds of people, though. Mainly
Yes, exactly.
people who probably don't have a lot of money.
And I will explain why he is a patron of gift giving and why he's associated with that. Because, he's the real life person that later turned into religious figures like Father Christmas in England or Santa Claus in the United States. And there are a whole lot of them. And we'll talk about these different versions of him in other videos. So we have 2 more videos talking about different versions of him. And they usually don't acknowledge too much of his life, but they're all related to gift giving. So the pictures that I've uploaded for you are pictures of Orthodox Greek churches. And what you need to know about Orthodoxy is that it's too much. Everything is too much. Too much gold, too much color, too much decoration. And I don't even mean that in a negative sense. So I have friends who are Russian Orthodox, and I've talked to them about it because it just it beats you in the head when you come into these churches. You have something to see everywhere. And according to people who are actually Russian Orthodox, in the Orthodox Church, the inside of the church is supposed to show you what heaven is going to look like. So it is so colorful and rich and golden and everything, because the church wants to show you how great heaven is. And then you have the same people who visited me, so I showed them some Catholic churches and Protestant churches in my area. So we went to a Catholic church that doesn't have that much gold, but it has like these paintings, these murals, like painted ceiling and everything. So it's nice, but not as nice as the Orthodox Church. And they said, yeah, it's okay. And then we went to the Protestant church, and that has a lot of wooden pews and doesn't have any gold at all. And it looks pretty empty. And when they got in, they looked around and they turned around to me and said, "You have been robbed."
That explains it.
Yeah. So those are the different stages of churches. Orthodoxy is big and beautiful and colorful and golden, and then you have Catholic churches who are like a little bit muted, and then you have Protestant churches that can look pretty empty for someone who comes from the Orthodox side. Okay, this was his natural environment. So there we have different depictions of him. The Greek icon again, and then more depictions. And in one, he looks quite close to Santa Claus already in that last one, St. Nicholas of Myra. So, yes, what are some of his miracles? We'll start with miracles related to children, and I've picked the 3 big ones. I've also got 3 big ones for the sailors and 1 for prisoners. So, 7 miracles. The first one is the one about gift giving. The first children's miracle. That's one he performed when he still had a lot of his money. So his parents died, and after his parents had died, he was quite rich. And he started giving away his money to the poor, which he was supposed to do as a priest and later on as a bishop. There was a very poor family in Myra, and they were thinking about selling their 3 young daughters into prostitution. So there was probably something going on that involved debt and someone who would come and break their legs if they didn't pay. You don't just start thinking about selling your underage children into prostitution.
True.
That must have been an emergency situation. St. Nicholas heard of that. And that is the situation that we've already seen in the other video, where he drops presents through the window from the street. But of course, that was a slightly different situation, because in this case, he dropped 3 sacks of gold. He dropped 1 each night, and he did this for 3 nights. In some cases, it's also a lump of gold. He solved their financial problem for them, but he didn't want to be recognized for it. So he's not someone who is posting this on Instagram. He's someone who wants to do good things but doesn't want to be known for it.
Right.
So this gold allowed the family to sort out their issues, and they were able to pay a dowry for each of the girls, so they could get a good marriage. And this is also the reason why St. Nicholas in some of the pictures is depicted with 3 lumps of gold or 3 golden apples. That refers to this gift-giving miracle. That is the one that made him the gift giver for Christmas. So it's actually a horrible backstory.
Kinda, but at least the children didn't get sold into prostitution, so that's good. Right?
Called CPS.
Oh, it's so strange.
I think in my situation, if I had witnessed something like that, I would have a problem with leaving these children with these parents, because there must have been other things they could have done.
Very true. It's weird that that is like the first desperate action they think of. You were quite right.
Okay, good. Next one, also a miracle that involves a child. And this is a wild one. So it's called the Miracle Baby Miracle. And it's about a man who visited Myra. And at that point, St. Nicholas was very, very famous for being a miracle worker. So this man and his wife had trouble conceiving, and he wanted to see St. Nicholas and get a blessing so they could have a child. But he was a little bit too late. When he arrived, St. Nicholas had just died. So what this man did was he asked for a piece of St. Nicholas's sheet as a relic, and it was given to him. So at least he didn't come home with empty hands. And 1 year later, on December the 6th, the first anniversary of Nicholas's death, his wife gave birth to a healthy boy.
Aww.
Let's not spin this. Yeah, let's not think too much about the sheet. Okay. But this is not the end of the story. So that's not the only miracle that happens, because St. Nicholas protected this child. So shortly before the boy's 7th birthday, he was kidnapped by Arabs, and he was taken to Babylon as a slave. And the parents went to St. Nicholas's church in Myra, and they prayed for help. And exactly 1 year after the kidnapping, the boy was picked up in Babylon by a tornado. And the tornado dropped him off in front of St. Nicholas's church in Myra, where the parents were still praying.
What the fuck?
I said this is a wild one.
That's a wild one. How eerily convenient. Drop it right off to the church where they were still praying. That's okay.
That's a whole different level of true crime, That's saintly true crime.
Saintly true crime. Well, is it a crime if he's simply stealing a child back that has been stolen? Is that a crime? I
No,
don't
but the
know.
kidnapping was a crime.
Yes, the kidnapping was a crime, and the child prostitution was also probably kind of a crime. But it's fine. Saint Nicholas is doing the good stuff, not the bad stuff.
Yes. Third miracle is the cannibalism miracle. So there was a great famine in Myra. And there is another miracle related to this great famine, and that is not that horrible. In this one, there are 3 students. They were traveling, and a local butcher in Myra captured them during the famine, murdered them, and pickled them in brine, very specific. And he was planning to sell them as pork because there was a famine going on.
Right.
So, yeah, St. Nicholas found out, and he went to that butcher. He talked to him in a very stern voice, probably. And then he resurrected the pickled students. So he actually brought them back from the dead, and he probably had to put them back together, because if they were pickled in brine in a barrel, then I think they wouldn't have fit in if the butcher had put them in whole. So
Yeah.
they
had to Frankenstein them back together. Okay.
Like, imagine he didn't put them back together correctly.
Oh god. Okay, well that's one I'd never heard of. That's a fucking strange one.
Yeah, I mean that didn't happen. He put them back together correctly, and they lived on, and everything was fine. But this one is the one with the brewers, where people got the wrong idea that he was a patron saint of brewers, because you have depictions of this miracle where you don't see the students, you see the barrel where they were in, and you see St. Nicholas talking to the butcher. So people assumed that there was beer in the barrel.
And not a dead body being pickled. Yeah. I understand that, because I too wouldn't think there's a dead body in a barrel being pickled.
Right. So that is why he's a patron saint of brewers. He's not actually. So, I mean, brewers still want his patronage. They still call to Saint Nicholas for help, but it's actually a misunderstanding, and it should probably be cannibals and like coroners.
Patron saint of cannibals, no.
Yes, but he is a patron saint of butchers, so
halfway there, I suppose.
Yes. Okay, the next 3 are the ones about sailors. So again, same famine. And that happened in 311 to 312. So that was a time where he was also imprisoned. So I have to suspect that this happened in 312 when Constantine the Great let him out. Probably late in the year. The famine in Myra was very, very bad, and a ship landed in their port that was loaded with wheat for the emperor in Constantinople. And the starving people of Myra asked for some wheat, naturally, but the sailors declined. And they said, well, everything has been weighed, And if we bring back less than we're supposed to, then we'll get into trouble with the emperor, and nobody wants that. You know what emperors do sometimes in the Roman Empire. So, I mean, they persecute Christians, they torture people in prison. So, yeah, we shouldn't do that. But then St. Nicholas appeared, and he told them that they needed to give his city some wheat. And he also promised them that nothing bad would happen to them in Constantinople. And this is really the point where he turns into Obi-Wan. These are not the droids you're looking for. It's fine. Leave the wheat.
This is not the wheat you're looking for.
It will be okay. So I don't know what he did, because they were extremely scared of the emperor's reaction, and they were right about this. This was a serious crime. But somehow he hypnotized them. So they agreed. And when they arrived in Constantinople, the wheat was weighed again, and it was the exact same weight as the full load that they had originally taken on board. So nothing was missing. But the wheat that they had left in Myra lasted for 2 years and was enough to sow new wheat.
Wow.
That is the grain miracle.
Certainly a miracle.
And he probably did this so people wouldn't continue murdering students to pickle them.
Yeah, for real.
Okay, then we have 2 more with sailors. And these 2 are related because he appears as a ghost. And he's not really the ghost of a dead person, but he has this astral projection of himself. So the real life St. Nicholas is in Myra, in his church. But at the same time, people see him out at sea. We'll get into this. The first one is calming a storm at sea. So, again, he was very, very famous. And a bunch of sailors got into a storm, and they had heard of him. They were on the way to Myra. They were actually planning to visit his church, but they had never met him in person. They invoked him during that storm. They prayed to him and to the living St. Nicholas. To make this clear, we're not talking about after his death. This happened while he was still alive.
Right.
And he appeared on board of their ship, took over navigation. He fixed the sails, and he actually calmed the storm. So they made it. They survived. They landed in Myra, and they went to the church there to thank God and also see the famous St. Nicholas. And when they saw him, they recognized him. They recognized that this was the man who came on board during the storm and fixed things for them.
Well. It's fucking... These are certainly some miracles, aren't they?
Yes. And I mean, usually you hear something like a saint became a saint after seeing the Virgin Mary, and he was the only person who saw her, and, you know, something like that. But he has some seriously cool miracles. So, last one at sea, pilgrims. He got into a supernatural argument with the goddess Diana. So Diana is the Roman name. The Greek name would be Artemis. And she's a goddess of hunting. She's also the twin sister of the god Apollo. And Apollo has the same name in Greek and Latin. During that time, while St. Nicholas was active, people still worshipped the old Greek gods and Roman gods. So in that case, they worshipped the Roman goddess Diana. And he didn't like that, so he chopped down a tree that was the shrine of Diana. As I said, he's quite hands-on. Like, he gets into fist fights and he chops down trees
to piss off gods. Wow.
Yes. So the goddess, of course, was furious, and this story is told as if she and Saint Nicholas are two actual people getting into a fight. So she decided to destroy his holy place in retaliation, and she was clever about it because she created oil for Greek fire, and Greek fire is a weapon used in antiquity. We can't really say what it was, but it was an oil-like substance that burned on stone and even burned on water. So she created the Greek fire in form of this oil. Then she disguised herself as an old woman, like in Snow White. And she gave the oil to some pilgrims who were on their way to Myra. And she told them that they needed to rub the holy oil on the walls of St. Nicholas's church in Myra when they arrived. And as the goddess that she was, a goddess of hunting, she was probably planning to burn down the church by shooting a burning arrow at it, because, she uses bows and arrows. So that was a clever plan, but it didn't work. St. Nicholas himself intercepted these pilgrims before their ship could reach Myra. So he intercepted them with a small boat at sea, and he made them pour the oil into the sea, and the sea suddenly burst into flame after that. So, as I said, Greek fire burns on water. But again, this was not St. Nicholas himself who had rowed out to sea to meet the pilgrims, but it was Ghost Nicholas. And when the pilgrims arrived and saw the actual Nicholas at home, they recognized him, and they realized that his apparition had prevented them from burning down the church.
Can't even make this shit up. That's crazy. Or did they?
Great, I love it. So last one is about prisoners, and again, that is a big patronage he has, so the whole judicial system stuff. It's kind of nice to think that the wardens as well as the prisoners are both protected by him. I mean, that is something that sounds very Christmassy.
A little bit.
Okay, he prevented executions twice. He did occasionally travel, and he met 3 Roman generals who were stationed in Constantinople, in the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. And at that time, it's still the original Roman Empire, so it's an unofficial capital. It's a place where goods from the Silk Road come in from the east. But it later becomes the official capital of the East Roman Empire when Western Rome, or original Rome, is destroyed. So, very important place in the East. And while these 3 generals from Constantinople were visiting Myra, they saw how Nicholas saved 3 innocent soldiers from wrongful execution. And again, he can't keep his fists down, so he saved them by punching the executioner in the face and wrestling the sword from his hands. So this is not a miracle. This is just St. Nicholas being himself. After that, these generals, they were kind of impressed because they didn't think that a holy man would be so hands-on. But they knew him, so they even knew him before they came to Myra, so it was probably not that much of a surprise, and they returned to Constantinople, or Byzantium as it was still called, because that was before Constantine the Great took over. And there someone denounced them. Someone told the emperor that they had conspired against them. The generals were imprisoned, and they got a death sentence, because of course that is a huge crime. It's treason. It's high treason in that case. And in prison, these 3 guys remembered the incident, and they prayed to Saint Nicholas, who was still alive at the time. So, again, he's not dead yet, but people are already praying to him. And Saint Nicholas reacted by sending a dream to the emperor and the man who had denounced these three generals. And that dream clarified what had actually happened and cleared the generals of all charges. And they were released.
Through a dream.
The emperor had a nightmare and thought, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't execute them.
Okay. Don't worry, you can always get acquitted of crimes if the judge ends up having a bad dream. Oh God.
In this case, yes.
Wow.
So, and now we should find out where Saint Nicholas's bones ended up. Why don't I have this? Let me see. Oh no, I don't have it. Where did I put it?
Oh no.
Okay. Yeah, okay, there it is. There's actually no picture. So, Saint Nicholas, when he died, he was interred in his own church. And he rested there for quite a while, so probably around 700 years, 700 to 8, well, not quite 800, but 750 years probably. And then the Battle of Manzikert happened in 1071. So this whole time, the Turks, who are a Central Asian tribe, they had tried to conquer the Byzantine Empire, and specifically Turkey. And as you can tell by the name, the Turks managed to conquer Turkey at one point. That was in 1453. That is the correct date. So from that point on, Turkey is Turkish. Before that, it was Greek for a very long time. So it has been less than 600 years that Turkey has been Turkish.
Oh.
But around the time when St. Nicholas lived, they were still trying. So this was still about 400 years before they made it. And there were some battles between the Greeks of that area and the Roman Empire, of course. But the Turks managed to break into what later became Turkey. And the people of Myra came under Turkish rule at that time. So some Italians showed up and they stole the bones from the church and brought them to Bari to protect them. They were not allowed to do this, and the monks in Myra, they objected to this, but the Italians just stole them. So that is why he's also called Nicholas of Bari.
Wow.
And that's only where his bigger bones ended up. Because the Italians were in a hurry because they were stealing. So
Yep. Oh no.
they had to get out fast. So they only grabbed the bigger bones, like the skull and probably the big leg bones, arm bones, and like ribs and that kind of stuff. They left behind the fingers and toes, for example. So a bit later, about 30 years later, the Venetian fleet showed up. And the Venetian fleet came in and collected these smaller bones from the tomb and took them to Venice against the will of the local monks. Again. So, two different Italians, 30 years apart, stole his bones and took them to southern Italy and northern Italy. And St. Nicholas has never been together again after that.
Ah, that's pretty tragic, actually. That's pretty sad.
Yes. Yes, and it's weird. So, I mean, I would probably negotiate with the other side and say, "Hey, can we just bury the bones together somewhere, maybe halfway between the cities?"
Maybe everything will be okay after that.
That would fix the world, like
It would fix the world.
really.
Gotta reunite St. Nicholas. Like,
Yes.
well,
Okay, so his relics are in Italy, but not in the same place. They're in two different places. And we're ending this with a Greek god again, one that is super ripped.
hmm.
Do you know who this is?
First thought that comes to mind is Hermes.
Yay! Very good.
Yay!
So there is a theory about Saint Nicholas because there isn't that much data on him. Um, so there's a possibility that this is a historical figure that is not completely historical, but there is kind of a real historical core. So there was a bishop of Myra, for example, but he was merged with a god of the ancient Greek faith. Because what happened when Christianity took over was that the heathens who had to become Christians, who were forced to become Christians, they tried to smuggle their old gods into the Christian faith. That is, for example, why we have the whole Yule thing with Christmas, because the heathens would not accept only Christian holidays. They would try to turn it a little bit so they could make it their own again, and their old gods would be represented. And that didn't just happen in the North Germanic area where Yule takes place. It also took place in the Greek areas or the Roman areas where the Mediterranean gods are worshipped. So this theory says that there could be a bit of Hermes in Saint Nicholas, because there is some overlap. Both are gods of traveling and travelers, of merchants and of thieves, so they kind of have the same patronages. Hermes is also a god of magic, military training, and he has a side hustle as a guide who leads the souls of the dead to Hades' realm. So that also connects him to Saint Nicholas, because Saint Nicholas is known as the wonder worker or miracle worker. And we've just heard about his ghostly appearances at sea, where he kind of projects himself. And he has a connection with the dead, so he doesn't just resurrect these pickled students, he resurrects more than one person. So that could be an overlap with Hermes, with his magic and the military training, like military connected to the judicial system, but also to the 3 soldiers and the 3 generals who were saved from execution. And then the thing with the dead. So Hermes is very familiar with the realm of the dead, and he brings people there. So maybe that's connected to Nicholas bringing them back from there, which would mean that it's kind of a hybrid between a historical bishop and a Greek god.
That is a weird overlap.
Yes. And as you can see, Hermes is also wearing red in this picture, and he has a staff. And historical Nicholas is depicted with a bishop's staff, which is not the same as this one. But wearing red and having a staff is also something that applies to Saint Nicholas.
Maybe there's something there.
Could be. It's an interesting theory. I mean, Hermes has also some departments that St. Nicholas doesn't cover, and vice versa. They don't have the exact same patronages, but there is an overlap.
Yeah, some overlap.
Something to think about tonight. while we're preparing the video about the Three Kings.
Quite right. How about that? Day number... Oh god, I've already lost it. Day number 6 down. My god. Thank you so much to my YouTube members and Patreon members for all the love and support. It's thanks to people like you that we can keep growing.